Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about some radios that you can use in potential emergency situations. The radios you see on the table are a variety of different types of radios ranging from what we call HF to VHF to UHF radios. Some are receivers, some are transceivers. The difference being a receiver only receives signals. A transceiver can not only just receive signals but can also transmit out signals. So we have a variety of different types of radios on here, from ham radio to MURS to CBs to shortwave type radios. So let's get through it and go over each one briefly and show some of them off with their speakers and whatnot. Starting on the top left, we have the Eton. This is the Microlink FR170. This is a great emergency radio, in my opinion, because it has a dynamo roller charger. So you can charge this thing up even if the batteries are dead and if it's not sunny out, or it has a solar panel on here which can also charge the battery. It has a little light in the front, and it is a AM, FM, and weather band radio. So that is a nice little function to have on a emergency radio, because usually weather stations are a little bit more local than the AM and FM type stations, and they provide direct information to weather conditions as opposed to AM and FM broadcast stations, usually anyway. So let's turn this on real quick and see if it can receive the AM band I have in here. It might be so as you can hear, it's not so good right now. Got to really get the dial in on the type of reception here.
We're just building out, and it's be here in the near future. The next decades, maybe they'll be able to make a There's sermons from Jeremiah Wright, who said GD America. Ironically, the exact number, that's 52 weeks.
So that is the speaker. It's decent. It's not the best, but it works in an emergency. And if you charge that thing up more than what it's charged up right now, it'll get obviously louder because you have more energy going through it. It's a great, fantastic little radio. It basically is future-proof with that dynamo charger. It will basically last a long time in storage. Although I do recommend any kind of electronics in storage, you charge up the batteries every so often. Next up is the more venerable C-Crane Skywave, and this thing is a fantastic shortwave receiver. It also has, which is rarely found on shortwave radios, a weather receiver function inside of it as well. It has a headphone output here. It has a mini USB charging port, powering port, and it has the tuning knob in here with both fine tuning and fast tuning, as they call it, a volume knob. It doesn't have any external antenna connections, which is kind of a bummer, but for its size, it's a very practical and useful travel radio. Let's turn this on real quick and unlock it. I like that it has a lock button down here so you can prevent it from turning on accidentally. It has a good back screen glow. I don't know if you can see that. Let's turn up the radio here.
It's not going to cost any money. It's just going to bankrupt you. I mean, he was like treated like a prince. And
so the speaker quality is decent
now, this guy
for its size, but it's not the best. This also receives single sideband, which we're not going to demonstrate right now, but there's lower and upper sideband.
Hey, James.
Yes, hi, Rody.
How are you?
All you have done, Miss Mayor, and in the cause. I have a question to ask you.
Okay, so that is the demonstration of the speaker on this. Very useful. It does get a little bit louder. It runs on 2 AA batteries, nickel metal hydride batteries in there. You can charge the nickel metal hydride batteries in there, which makes this a very practical item for emergencies of a USB power source. So obviously we have a lot of USB power banks around these days. This thing will function off of that. It's very small and very portable, as you can see, compared to most of the radios here, especially the shortwave receiving ones. Very effective. Something I would definitely recommend. It does also aircraft band as well as AM, FM, and it's basically a very, very portable all-in-one station, and it's one of my favorite. It's very expensive though. It's about $120 to about $200 now. Moving along, we have a 4AA battery powered radio. This is the venerable Sony 7600GR. The ICF SW 7600GR. On the side here, we have a little bit more options. We have a powered AM external antenna port. We have an attenuator with a knob to fine-tune that attenuation of a line out. Again, another headphone port which outputs stereo with the FM function. We have a DC in at 6 volts. Then on the side, we have the single sideband knob here for receiving and fine-tuning. We have the upper and lower sideband switch. And then we have the sync, normal, and sideband switch here. And then we have the filtering, which is news or music. Then we have the volume knob here at the bottom. And then in the front, you can see the keypad here for direct entry, which is really nice. Unlike some radios, like the Eton, for example, you don't get that. It has another hold function on here, so if I push on these buttons, it doesn't turn on. It has a little light on here. These are the tuning buttons here. It doesn't have a tuning knob like the Skywave, which is kind of annoying. This does also mute on tuning, except the fine tuning part. If you hold it down, it'll scan through without muting, which is kind of nice. Let's turn this on real quick just to get a sound check.
And these people don't have good motives about anything. Maybe the old man's going to follow up and try to get some money from Taiwan. Who knows? He may be coming in there later for a big flush of money, which she and he often do, particularly in Eastern Europe.
So as you can hear, that's got a really nice sound quality to it. It's very comfortable to listen to for non-practical reasons, for enjoyment. In an emergency, this is a good radio because it's very sensitive to reception, and it does sideband as well as the Skywave. It doesn't do airband, unfortunately, but it does do sideband, which is something that can be valuable in a pinch also. And it runs off of 4 AA batteries. You can put nickel metal hydride rechargeable batteries in it, so you can have a variety of type of batteries, alkaline or nickel metal hydride. Overall, it's a great radio to find if you can find it for a good price online. So that is the first 3 receivers. The next one is going to be a transceiver, and I have both the Elecraft KX2, which is this one here, and the KX3 fully loaded, which is off camera. I'm not going to go over that, but they're both similarly the same radio. This has a few extra options. It has that cover, which I just took off, and the side KX handles, which don't come with the radio by default. So it might look a little bit different online if you look for it. This is basically an 80 to 10 meter transceiver, and it has a wider reception included with that. So not only just receives on 80 to 10, but it can receive further. It can receive more frequencies, basically. It has a BNC external antenna adapter, as an internal microphone port, so you can attach say a 10 meter whip on this thing, and you can use it as an HT with the transmit button here, which I don't do, but it's kind of cool. This is pretty good for an emergency. It's very, very, very versatile in terms of its options and filtering. Let's turn it on real quick. You're not going to hear anything off it, but you can see what the UI kind of looks like here. We have a whole bunch of buttons that are laid out in a pretty intuitive way for operations. When I go hilltopping, I use this a lot for summits on the air and just general portable work. I have a filter section here where I can make this a wide filter or a narrow, and I can notch it if I want. I can also use this for digital modes like FT4, FT8, or JTS. I forget what the acronyms are, but basically you get the idea. This thing's a versatile radio. It comes very, very recommended from a lot of people, but it's very expensive. So first time guys getting into emergency radios and transceivers, I may not recommend this one because it's so expensive and the learning curve can be kind of steep. But if you're a buy once, cry once kind of guy, this is not a bad radio to have. If you have your license, amateur radio license, and you can transmit with this radio, or if you just want to listen, this actually is a decent listening radio. If you have an external speaker, and I'll show you why in a moment here. I'm just trying to get this back on. So basically on the bottom, this is the speaker. The battery you unscrew these knobs here, and the battery can come out. The speaker is absolute garbage. I understand they had to make some concessions while making this so small and powerful. The worst thing about this is the actual speaker knob, the speaker, and the lack of a charging port in here. Other than that, it's a great radio. It's just one of the best little small transceivers. I have a KX3 fully loaded as well, which is the bigger brother of this, and a Yaesu 817, which is a fantastic field radio as well. Moving off the main HF rigs, we have one more HF radio to do. I'm going to kind of skip ahead here and talk about the Kenwood TH F6A. This one is a Triband VHF UHF radio in addition to being an HF receiver as well. So basically what that means is this runs on 2 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeter bands. So you can transmit on 3 different bands with this radio, and you can also receive wide banded with this radio on single sideband. Now that's really important compared to all these other handhelds on the table. This is the only one on the table that will do single sideband reception, both lower and upper, and it also has a CW mode too as well, which is kind of interesting. So let's turn this on and get an idea for the speaker real quick. This has an AM bar antenna in it, so it has exceptional reception for the AM bands, broadcast bands.
I can't drive. Somebody can drive me, so Dr. Maria gets the honor most of the time of driving. And she's a great
I believe I know that about Dr. Brian.
She's a better driver than I am anyway.
I have to go on.
Okay, let's turn that off for now. I've already done a video on this, and it's a fantastic radio. Basically, it's really good for emergencies because it has a lot of the features you would find in a shortwave receiver packed into the small format of an HT, of a ham radio. So it's the smallest single sideband transceiver that I have currently. It doesn't transmit on HF, but it transmits on VHF and UHF, and that is more than adequate for an emergency situation, in my opinion. And this is one of my favorite radios, second favorite radio, in fact. Moving along, though, to the Yaesu line here, we have the FT1D. Now, this is a wide-banded receiver as well. It will receive broadcast AM and FM bands, as well as shortwave stations. What's nice about this, as you can hear, is the speaker is higher quality. It sounds much better than the previous handheld, the Kenwood, and some of the, even the Skywave and the Eton.
Well, basically my personal opinion is that...
Okay, so that has an AM bar antenna as well. So it's really good for receiving AM with the internal bar, or you can attach external antennas to the radios and increase your receiving performance. Now, what's nice about this particular radio is that it does both analog and a digital mode called Fusion or C4FM, and it also receives weather. It does a unique thing called APRS, or Automatic Packet Reporting System. Basically, it sends out a beacon of digital information to a tower, a radio tower, ham radio tower in this case, and what it does is sends your location via the GPS that's inside the radio here. So it can send your coordinates to the internet if the radio tower's linked to the internet, and somebody can track you on a map with this as a beacon. So it's very important for emergency situations, obviously, because then if you're in search and rescue, or if you're lost and you can't talk, or if someone just wants to track your movements, a family member or whatever, well, it's open to the public, so, but they don't know what call sign to look for, basically. So take it with a grain of salt. Basically, it's a beaconing radio, and people can track you if you want them to. And the digital part is a good, shall I say, privacy option, because not everybody's going to have C4 FM decoding, encoding radios. So it's not fully secured comms, but it is more of a private comm. And you can send information other than phone information or voice with this radio. You can buy a mic that has a camera in it, and you can attach it to this radio, send a picture through the radio, through the waves, and somebody else with a radio that can decode the picture can see it. Or you can even send an email out with this radio. It's kind of cool, or text to a phone if you hit a tower with internet connectivity via the APRS beacon. But I digress. I don't want to get too complicated with this. Great radio, has wideband reception. It's a dual band radio, functions on 2 meters and 70 centimeters, and it's IPX4 rated, so it is a little bit more rugged than the other radios we have here. Next up, we have the Alinco DJ MD5. This is the newest addition to the lot here that I have. This one is a Part, I believe, 90 compliant radio, meaning you can use it on business frequencies like MURS and other stuff if you're working in first responder situations and you're a ham radio operator. This does a digital mode called DMR, Digital Mobile Radio. It's a derivative of a Motorola type of digital form of communications, I believe. This also has the ability to monitor 2 frequencies at once, much like the FT1D and the Kenwood. I forgot to mention these have 2 types of radios in it, so you can listen to 2 radio frequencies at once. This one also has APRS in it as well, like the FT1D, so you can beacon out to the tower and somebody can track you via this radio. However, this one does not have a decoder in it like the Yaesu, so you can't decode other APRS beacons going out on the same frequency. So you will not be able to see what the other signals are saying in their messages. I don't have anything programmed in here for the AM band because this doesn't receive AM. It does receive FM, but it's kind of a pain to go through all the UI menu options to enable the FM radio on this thing. That's probably the only downfall with the Alinco here, is that it's not as wideband as the rest of the radios, which is plus and minus depending which way you want to look at it. But for an emergency situation, that will work very well. It does have DMR digital, so it has privacy, and it also has what these all don't have is a encryption module, meaning you can do AES 256-bit encrypting on this radio, so you do have secure comms for the most part, unless somebody else has a decoder, cracker, or whatever you want to call it, to decode your information, but that takes time. In other words, basically it's secure comms for an emergency situation, especially tactical, I guess you'd call it, or a engagement. You would want some kind of encryption on your comms, and this would be the radio to use. It's not as rugged as the FT1D. It's not waterproofed IPX4, but it does have water resistant housing. Moving along to my favorite radio out of the bunch here, and the one that I've used the most over the past 10 years or so, is my daily EDC radio, the VX7r. This is a quad-band radio, and it's waterproof up to, I think, 6 meters or so, or 2 meters rather, for about 30 minutes. It has a membrane over the microphone, so the audio reports on the air aren't that great unless you get it right up on the mic. Let's turn this on and hear the speaker on this one. It's a bit tinny sounding. Okay, let's turn that off. So you heard the speaker. It's very tinny. It's not pleasurable to listen to, but it works in the pinch and especially in an emergency. What I like about this radio is that it has a wideband reception, much like these other radios here. It doesn't do sideband, but it does AM. It does 6 meter FM and AM at 1 watt. It does 2 meters at 5 watts FM. It does 1.25 meters, which is 220 megahertz at about 300 milliwatts, and it does 70 centimeters at 5 watts or so. So it's a quad band radio. It's the only radio on the table that's a quad band radio. It's very rugged and it's waterproof and it's very small. And that's why I use this as my daily EDC radio, because it's a very versatile radio, has good reception for the most part, and it can transmit on 4 different bands. So that makes this a very unique radio amongst these others on the table, and that's why I recommend it for an emergency situation. They're hard to find on eBay, but if you take your time and you bid right, or if you go to a Ham Radio Fest, you can find any of these radios for a decent price probably. Moving along to my third favorite radio, and that is the VX1r. Now this is a micro HT form factor. This is a dual band radio. It's 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and it can run off of USB power with a DC to USB jack via the side port here, and this thing transmits at about 500 milliwatts out on the battery on high, 50 milliwatts out on the battery on low, or about 1 watt out with the power input in here, and about 500 milliwatts out with the power on low. This one I can turn on, but I'm not going to receive much of anything in here. I have it set for the weather frequency here. You can receive weather with this one as well. It can receive AM broadcast stations and FM broadcast stations, as well as the TV channels, what they call used to call TV channel bands, Action 1 and 2 bands. Basically, it goes up to about 900 megahertz or so with this reception on this radio, and it's very small. It's one of the smallest marketable HTs out there in the world right now, and it's very hard to find it because it's older technology. I like it because it's small, and more than likely I'll have one on me. In fact, let me get my kit out here and show you real quick. I have a kit I'm working on. This is another EDC bag, and you won't see the radio in it directly, but it's in this EMP resistant bag behind all the stuff. That's why I keep the VX1R in there. So this radio is valuable for its size and form factor, and its utility that it offers for its size and form factor. So in other words, it's a very versatile radio that has multiple powering options, especially in the field. It can run off a USB power and transmit and receive without any hindrance to its sensitivity. So if you see one of these radios, I recommend definitely getting it for one of your kits. They are expensive. You can find them at Hamfest again. But that's all I want to say about the VX1R. I can go on and on for days about it. Here's the VX3R, the older brother, the newer older brother, I should say, or the bigger brother of the VX1R. Basically a dual bander, just like this radio here. 2 meter, 70 centimeter transceiving capabilities, and also wideband receive capabilities, much like the other radios here. Does AM broadcast and shortwave now, frequencies, and FM broadcast stations as well. And it goes up to about 999 megahertz or so, I believe. And the difference between the VX1 and VX3 is there's a couple of things. The battery's changed. It doesn't have a clip. It has a stereo output jack for earphone jack specifically, and it does not run on 5 volts power, but you can still charge it a little bit. It also, in terms of scanning abilities, you can scan both VHF and UHF frequencies in the same memory bank. This only does VHF or UHF in its memory bank, so you have to select it manually. Overall, this is a great radio. It has a AM bar antenna in it. Let's turn it on, hear the speaker. Okay, so you get an idea for the speaker. It's not the best, but it's much better than the VX1R, and which you haven't heard, but take my word for it. This is a great airplane travel radio, in my opinion, because it has the earphone port plugs, so you can listen to stereo decoded FM transmissions, or it's just a really convenient radio to have on you. It's small and portable. Again, for emergencies, it's a transceiver, and it does a little bit more wattage out on the battery power. I think it's like maybe 1.5 watts out on the battery and about, I think, 500 milliwatts on low. And that changes with an external power source, of course. But I digress. This thing has a lot of things going for it. Basically, it's like the Kenwood TH F6A without the single sideband and the DTMF keypad on it. So if you can find this radio, it's hard to find. It's very expensive, but it is a nice radio to have for an emergency because it offers a lot for its size. Again, it's a micro HT like the VX1R, and it's one of the best ones around out there. Although I would choose the VX1R over this because it's more flexible for my needs. Moving along, we have a monoband radio. That's the VX170. This is a 2 meter ham radio. Again, you need a license for some of these ham radios here to operate transmitting wise, unless it's a dire emergency, then you can transmit with them. That's okay to do. So I digress. This is a 2 meter radio. It's monoband. It does receive, I think, from 130 to about 174. I don't remember exactly the full reception, but it can receive weather frequencies. I don't think I'm going to get any down here in my room. Okay, so you heard a little bit of that. I had to hold it a certain way off camera to capture the signal, but the speaker is okay. Nothing to write home about. It's about 1 watt output, so it's a decent loudness. What's nice about this is that it's also IPX7, much like the VX7R here, so it's highly rugged. You can dip this in the water, you'll be fine. So if you're doing a lot of water activity and you want a good emergency radio, this might be it. You can mod it out to transmit on Mars Cat frequencies as well. It has a rugged AA battery adapter in there, or a standard lithium-ion battery. You can use a drop-in charger with it. Overall, it's a solid working radio for anybody getting into radios for emergencies. And if they want to become a ham radio operator, I recommend getting your license so that you can operate normally and practice radio operations in non-emergency situations, because that would make sense. Moving along, we have the non-licensed versions of radios for emergencies. We have the Motorola MTS2000 here. This is my work radio for the parks. We've repurposed a lot of these radios, my brother and I, to work on MURS frequencies and also our ham radio frequencies since we have our licenses. But basically what you need for these radios to work is a programming cable, the old software, and a computer that's basically like a 486 type of computer or running some type of DOS or emulator of DOS to program these radios. These are not front-end programmable radios, as you can see here on the table. Everything else is pretty much front-end programmed, with the exception of the Alinco there. That's a little bit different. But these are rugged. They're good for emergency situations because once you program the frequencies into the memory banks, you can program ham frequencies, you can program weather frequencies. This is a VHF transceiver, not a UHF, but just strictly a monoband transceiver again. So this is very versatile. It's rugged. Police, fire, and even some auxiliary security uses these types of radios. This is an older model, obviously, so it's about 20-something years old. It's outdated, but it's still rugged, and it's good price cost on eBay if you find a good deal. Moving along, we have another MURS type radio. This is a Radio Shack one. You can find radios like this on eBay for the cheap. This one has only one channel. It's the green channel on it, channel 5 of the MURS. This uses crystals in it. Again, this is good for an emergency because it's just a basic two-way radio. Sometimes all you need is a simple radio for emergency communications, depending on your needs. Again, this is just a broad term of emergencies, but you get the idea. You can find a MURS radio like this and use it. It's a nice little old style 1990s business radio. Moving along, we have a newer version or newer type of radio that emulates the MURS. This is the Retevis RT47v. This is a 5-channel MURS radio. It doesn't have a knob to change the frequencies. It has 2 buttons on here that are dual functioning buttons.
1, 5, 1.
So you can see you can change it up and down, or you can hold it down and it does a secondary function. Okay, this is waterproof IPX7 like the VX7r and the VX170, but it's only 5 channels. It's plug and play. The radio comes with a drop-in charger, USB powered, so it's very versatile in the field in terms of powering options. It's rugged. It has the ability to use accessories like this waterproof handheld mic. I don't know how well built the handheld mic is, but it's definitely not Motorola quality, I can tell you that. For the radio, but it is a good radio to have. It's very portable, very lightweight. Definitely something you want to look into. It's price appropriate for anybody looking for two-way communications, and it's MURS frequency. And what MURS means is multiple use radio service, and that translates to radio service that you can use for private or business use without a license. So that's what these 3 radios are here on the table. And again, one more thing to mention about the RT47v Retevis is that the antennas can come off, and you can get external antennas with this or make your own, which does improve the transmission quality of these kind of radios. So definitely recommend that for an emergency for strictly two-way communications. Moving along, we have the popular CB radio. Everybody knows what this is. This is a 40-channel handheld CB radio. It's 11 meters, 40 channels on here. It only works in amplitude modulation or AM mode. Most of these radios are FM mode transceivers with AM receivers inside of it. This is an AM transceiver, with the exception of the VX7r, because the VX7r does AM on 6 meters, but I won't get into that. This does a good job. You know, a lot of people like to bash on CB. I don't, because it's another tool, and like any tool, there's an appropriate time to use it in place. So this thing will get out to a lot of people who still use CBs today. I recommend you start out your kit with at least 1 or 2 CBs in your kit so that you can communicate with everybody else who doesn't have a ham license or shortwave radio. So that this would be a good emergency communications device because a lot of people still use CBs, and it is a popular form of communication. Last one on the list here is another receiver. This is not mine, it's my brother's. This is the Radio Shack Pro 164 scanner. This is a trunking receiver, multi-system trunking scanner receiver. And basically, you program your frequencies in it, and you figure out what the trunking is, and I believe it stores it in there. It has weather reception, does VHF, UHF, even low band VHF stuff. So very practical to have a scanner in your kit, your emergency kit. And I would always recommend a scanner in a emergency situation, so you can listen to local comms in certain situations. It can be very helpful to have something like this, in addition to having any one of these transceivers or receivers. So this is strictly a receiver, it's not a transceiver. Again, this is a very practical and valuable item. I don't have one of my own because I have so many other radios that do a lot of the functions that this does, even though this is trunking. The newer ones are a little bit more advanced than excuse me, the Radio Shack one. They do like P25, DMR, all these digital modes, like the Home Patrol series probably, and a couple others. Icon makes some really fantastic scanner receiver radios, which I do recommend checking out. But generally, that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of radios for emergencies. A lot of these radios do different things, as you've heard and seen. So find the one that fits your needs the best. Do a lot of research on it. I thought this video would be interesting for you guys to watch, and thanks for staying this long to watch the video. Have a good day, and thank you for watching.